When Yvette Prieto was erroneously identified as a cleaning staff member at London's most prestigious hotel and subjected to contemptuous treatment by the management on account of her unassuming appearance, little did she foresee that a singular telephone conversation with her spouse would precipitate one of the costliest lessons in dignity ever witnessed within the hospitality sector. Michael Jordan orchestrated a response that would not only restore the respect due to his wife, but completely revolutionize the hospitality standards of one of the world's most exclusive hotels. What followed did not merely transform a single establishment, it redefined how an entire industry treats those it judges based on first impressions. It was a September morning in London. A fine drizzle cloaked the streets like a veil of melancholy. Yvette had arrived alone in the English capital. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel stood majestically before her. Italian marble, Austrian crystals, Persian rugs, a veritable temple of luxury where every detail whispered elegance. Yvette took a deep breath. This trip was her birthday gift to herself. 3 days of unadulterated freedom. She had chosen the presidential suite, and after a leisurely bath, Yvette made her way towards the hotel's gift shop. She intended to purchase some postcards to send to friends. Dressed in a white t-shirt and jeans, she sought to remain inconspicuous. However, as she passed through the lounge area, something caught her eye. A blonde woman, approximately 50 years old, was gesticulating animatedly while speaking on the phone. Her British accent sliced through the air like a sharp blade. She wore a gray Armani suit and ostentatiously displayed expensive jewelry. Her name tag identified her as Madison Clark, operations manager. "No, I don't accept excuses," Madison bellowed into the phone. "The service must be impeccable always," Yvette observed discreetly. The woman exuded a type of arrogance Yvette knew all too well. She had encountered individuals like this at social events, perpetually striving to impress, invariably gauging others' worth by their outward appearance. Madison slammed the phone down with excessive force and scanned her surroundings as if seeking something to criticize. Her gaze fixated on Yvette. For a moment, their eyes met. Yvette offered a polite smile, but Madison did not reciprocate. Instead, her expression morphed into something between confusion and irritation. Yvette continued walking, yet she felt Madison's eyes following her. There was something unsettling about that gaze, a cold appraisal that made her feel uneasy. At the gift shop, Yvette selected several postcards featuring iconic London landmarks: Big Ben, Tower Bridge, Buckingham Palace, symbols of a city she was eager to explore. "Is that all?" inquired the attendant, a middle-aged Englishwoman. "Yes, thank you," Yvette replied, handing over a credit card. As she awaited payment, she heard approaching footsteps. She turned to see Madison Clark striding towards her with determined steps. Her face bore an expression of barely contained authority. "Excuse me," Madison stated, her voice laden with condescension. Yvette turned, anticipating a routine inquiry, perhaps concerning directions or hotel amenities. But what transpired next left her utterly blindsided. "Are you new here?" Madison inquired, scrutinizing Yvette from head to toe. "Pardon me?" Yvette responded, failing to grasp the query. "New to the housekeeping staff," Madison interjected, snapping her fingers with an air of impatience. "I don't recognize you." Yvette's world ground to a halt. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she had misheard, but Madison's gaze underscored that there was no room for misinterpretation. "I don't work here," Yvette stated calmly, her voice betraying only a faint tremor. Madison let out a laugh, a grating, unpleasantly resonant sound that reverberated throughout the store. Other patrons began to cast glances in their direction. "Of course you do," Madison declared, deliberately amplifying her voice. "Look at you, that inexpensive attire, that demeanor. Are you attempting to masquerade as a guest?" The shop attendant observed the unfolding scene with mounting disquiet. Yvette felt a flush creep up her neck and face, yet she retained her equanimity. "I am a guest at this hotel," she asserted, her voice firm despite the burgeoning humiliation. "A guest?" Madison guffawed even louder. "Do you think I was born yesterday? I'm familiar with your sort, always attempting to insinuate themselves where they don't belong." The situation was devolving into a public spectacle. Other patrons paused their conversations to observe. Yvette felt the collective gaze of onlookers pivot towards her. Madam, please, the attendant attempted to intercede discreetly. Don't interfere, Carol, Madison rebuked the employee. I'm addressing a security concern. Yvette took a fortifying breath, striving to maintain her composure. She had encountered discrimination previously, but never in such a flagrantly public and demeaning manner. I have my key card right here, she stated, beginning to rummage through her handbag. A key card? Madison scoffed anew. Anyone can retrieve an old card from the refuse bin. Do you truly believe you can deceive me? Madison's voice was escalating in volume, ensuring her pronouncements resonated throughout the lobby. It was an orchestrated humiliation, a cruel performance staged for an unwitting audience. Let's resolve this at the front desk, Yvette suggested, attempting to extricate herself. No, we'll settle this right here, Madison retorted, obstructing her egress. I want everyone to see who you truly are. At that precise moment, a tall, imposing man approached. His impeccably tailored suit and authoritative bearing bespoke a high-ranking position within the hotel's hierarchy. His name badge corroborated this. Robert Davis, General Manager. What seems to be the issue here, Madison? Robert asked, but his tone suggested he had already taken a side. I found this person trying to pass herself off as a guest. Madison pointed at Yvette with disdain, clearly part of the cleaning staff trying to infiltrate. Robert scrutinized Yvette with critical eyes. She could see the assessment unfolding in real time. Her dark skin, her Latin features, her simple attire, everything being cataloged and judged. Madam, I need to see your identification, Robert said, his voice heavy with suspicion. Of course, Yvette replied, maintaining her dignity despite the humiliating situation. She opened her purse and took out her wallet, but before she could present any document, Madison interjected again. Fabricated documents are common, Madison said, loud enough for everyone to hear. These people are very creative. The phrase "these people" echoed through the lobby like a slap. Yvette felt the full weight of the prejudice in every syllable. It wasn't just about her supposed profession, but about who she was, where she came from, how she appeared. You are making a mistake, Yvette said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. The only mistake here, Robert said, smiling condescendingly, is someone thinking they can deceive us. Madison crossed her arms, clearly pleased with the spectacle she had created. Other hotel staff began to approach, drawn by the commotion. Call security, Madison ordered dramatically. Let's put an end to this now. Yvette looked around. Dozens of eyes watched her, some with curiosity, others with pity, many with the kind of morbid fascination people feel at the scene of a car accident. That won't be necessary, she said, her voice low but clear. I'm going to my room. Your room? Madison guffawed. You mean the supply closet? Madison's laughter was met with a few nervous chuckles from the onlookers. Yvette felt each laugh like a dagger, but the worst was yet to come. You know what truly irks me? Madison continued, clearly intoxicated by the attention. It's this audacity. These people think they can just waltz into places like this and pretend to be something they're not. Robert nodded in approval, clearly endorsing Madison's performance. Their complicit smiles revealed that this was more than casual discrimination. It was deliberate cruelty. Perhaps we should call the press, Robert suggested sarcastically. A hotel employee trying to pass herself off as a socialite. The barb was met with a fresh wave of laughter. Yvette felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to grant them the satisfaction. You will regret this, she stated, her voice imbued with an unyielding dignity that even public humiliation could not erode. Threats now? Madison's voice ratcheted up another notch. Look at how she reacts when confronted with the truth. Yvette walked toward the elevators, each step a masterclass in dignified bearing under fire. Behind her, Madison and Robert's cackles echoed like hyenas reveling in a kill. Don't forget to scrub the toilets, Madison shrieked, prompting a fresh round of laughter. The elevator doors closed, finally offering Yvette a sanctuary from the public ordeal. She pressed the button for the 10th floor with trembling hands. In the elevator's mirror, she saw a shattered woman, but in the depths of her gaze, something else was coalescing. It wasn't merely anger, it was resolve. Madison Clark and Robert Davis had no inkling of what they had awakened. The presidential suite had never seemed so profoundly silent. Yvette closed the door behind her and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. She slid down the door to the floor, her composure utterly disintegrating. 15 minutes elapsed before she managed to rise. She walked to the window, observing London through a veil of tears. The city continued its quotidian rhythm, oblivious to the emotional upheaval that had transpired in the hotel lobby. Yvette went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. In the mirror, she saw a woman who had been broken, but not irrevocably shattered. There was a crucial distinction between the two. She picked up the room phone and hesitated. Michael was in Chicago, immersed in critical Jordan Brand meetings. He had insisted she call him at any moment, but she had promised herself this would be her independent venture. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Yvette? Are you all right, love?" Michael's voice carried that potent blend of strength and tenderness she had come to cherish. Even through the phone line, she could feel his protective presence. "Michael," her voice faltered. "What happened?" The concern in his voice was palpable. "Are you hurt?" "Not physically," she managed, taking a shaky breath, "but something happened at the hotel." "Tell me everything." Yvette recounted the events from the lobby, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Michael remained silent, but she could hear his breathing growing heavier, a sign she recognized as escalating anger. "They said what?" His voice perilously low. "Michael, don't do anything rash," Yvette said quickly. "I managed to extricate myself from the situation." "Extricate yourself from the situation?" The rage in his voice was unmistakable. "Yvette, you are my wife. You are an incredible woman, irrespective of anything I've accomplished, and they treated you like trash," she completed the sentence. "I know." A long silence ensued. Yvette could picture Michael in his office, fists clenched, jaw taut. She had seen that expression before, during the most intense moments of his basketball career. "What were their names?" Michael asked with a calm that was more chilling than any shout. "Madison Clark and Robert Davis," Yvette replied. "But Michael, I don't want you to—" "You don't want me to what?" he interjected. "To protect my wife? To show these people there are consequences for their actions? I don't want you to stoop to their level." Michael chuckled, but there was no humor in the sound. It was the laugh of a predator who had just found its quarry. "Love, you don't understand," he said, his voice taking on a tone she rarely heard. "I'm not going to stoop to their level. I'm going to elevate them to mine so they understand exactly whom they decided to humiliate." "What does that mean?" "It means Madison Clark and Robert Davis are going to learn a lesson they will never forget." Michael paused. "How many days did you plan to stay there?" 3 days. Why?" "Perfect. Enough time for me to make some arrangements." Yvette felt a chill run down her spine. She had known Michael long enough to know that when he spoke like that, significant developments were imminent. "Michael, what are you planning?" "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice softening. "Of course I do." "Then trust me, I'll handle everything. You just enjoy London. Go to the theater, visit museums, be a tourist. Leave the rest to me. But the hotel, don't worry about the hotel. In fact, don't worry about anything at all. Just be yourself. The incredible woman I fell in love with." Yvette felt fresh tears welling, but this time they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of gratitude for having someone who loved her unconditionally. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." "And Yvette?" "Yes. Once this is all over, Madison Clark and Robert Davis will implore your forgiveness. That is a promise." After they hung up, Yvette felt an unusual sense of calm. She was unsure what Michael was orchestrating, but she knew her husband. When he made a promise, he honored it. She took a long bath, changed her clothes, and resolved to follow Michael's advice. She would be a tourist. She would embrace London. But deep within her mind, a flicker of anticipation began to ignite. Madison Clark and Robert Davis had no inkling of what was about to unfold. Chicago, 3:30 a.m. Michael Jordan had been awake for 2 hours, seated in his home office, surrounded by an array of phones, laptops, and an unwavering resolve rarely witnessed since his days on the court. He had made 3 pivotal calls. The first was to Marcus Thompson, his personal assistant and right-hand man in business operations. The second to David Chen, his financial advisor. The third to Sarah Williams, his attorney specializing in international acquisitions. "Marcus, I need you to clear my schedule for the next 3 days," Michael stated, his voice firm and resolute. "Understood, MJ. May I inquire as to the reason?" "We're acquiring a hotel in London." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marcus had worked with Michael for 10 years and knew that when he spoke with such conviction, there was no room for equivocation. "Which hotel?" "The Ritz-Carlton. I want comprehensive data on the property, its corporate structure, market valuation, and financial history on my desk within 2 hours." "By 5:30 a.m.? "Marcus, my wife was publicly humiliated at that hotel. 2 individuals presumed they could treat her with utter disdain. Now they will learn that there are severe repercussions for their actions." The line went silent for a moment. Marcus had witnessed Michael compete, had observed his legendary tenacity, but this time something felt distinctly different. This was personal. "Understood. I'll commence immediately." "And Marcus?" "Absolute discretion. No one is to know of our interest in the hotel until I give the word." Michael hung up and immediately dialed David Chen. It was 8:30 a.m. in Hong Kong, the ideal time to reach his financial advisor. "David, I require immediate liquidity," Michael stated without preamble. "Good morning to you too, Michael. How much liquidity are we discussing?" "Sufficient to acquire the Ritz-Carlton in London. That's approximately $800 million, contingent on negotiations." "Then procure $800 million. David Chen had managed Michael's fortune for over a decade. He knew the former player did not issue requests of this nature without grave reasons. "May I inquire about the urgency?" "Personal matter. I need this to transpire within the next 2 days." 2 days? Michael, acquisitions of this magnitude typically take months. "David, have you ever seen me relinquish something I truly desire?" "Number. Then make it happen. Leverage all your contacts, every favor owed to you. I intend to own this hotel before the end of the week." Michael disconnected the call and immediately dialed Sarah Williams. She answered on the first ring, despite it being 4:15 a.m. in New York. "Sarah, I need you in London today." "Today?" "Michael, it's 4 in the morning. I am well aware of the time. I need you to coordinate the acquisition of the Ritz-Carlton. This is a highly confidential operation, utmost priority." Sarah had represented Michael in dozens of significant transactions. She knew that when he adopted that tone, there was no room for debate. "Understood. I'll secure the first flight." "And Sarah, I want you to unearth everything you can about 2 employees, Madison Clark and Robert Davis." "Any particular issue?" "They made the grave error of humiliating my wife. Now they will learn that some individuals are untouchable." After disconnecting, Michael leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a cold smile. He had built an empire through sheer determination, astute strategy, and impeccable execution. Today, he would apply these same aptitudes to a far more personal objective. At 5:30 a.m., Marcus arrived at the office with 3 thick folders and 2 laptops. He had worked incessantly to gather intelligence on the Ritz-Carlton. "What have you ascertained?" Michael inquired. "The hotel is owned by a British conglomerate named Pemberton Holdings. They possess a portfolio of 12 luxury properties across Europe. Their financial standing? Intriguing. They are currently experiencing some fiscal difficulties owing to the pandemic and economic instability. They have forfeited approximately 40% of their revenue over the past 2 years." Michael nodded. Financial vulnerability was precisely what he required. "Proceed." "The Ritz-Carlton in London stands as their crown jewel. It accounts for approximately 35% of the group's entire revenue. Should they lose that property, the entire empire would be jeopardized," Michael interjected. "Precisely. But here's the intriguing aspect. They've spurned 2 acquisition offers in the past 6 months. They're unwilling to sell." Michael smirked. He relished challenges. "What was the valuation of the offers?" "The most substantial was $750 million. Then we'll table an offer of $900 million. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. $900 million? Michael, that's $150 million above the market valuation. Marcus, Have you ever witnessed me concede a game I was truly determined to win? Number, then place your faith in me. At times, to attain what you desire, one must be prepared to pay a premium that one's competitors are unwilling to match. As Marcus collated the documents, Michael retrieved his phone and dialed a number possessed by a select few globally. The call was answered instantaneously. Sir Richard, this is Michael Jordan. Sir Richard Pemberton, a 68-year-old British aristocrat, nearly spilled his morning teacup. It was 11:30 a.m. in London, and this call was decidedly unexpected. Mr. Jordan, what an utterly unforeseen surprise. Sir Richard, I'll get straight to the point. I want to buy the Ritz-Carlton in London. Well, Mr. Jordan, as I've told the other interested parties, that property is not for sale. It's our crown jewel. $900 million. The silence on the other end of the line lasted 15 seconds. Michael could imagine the British aristocrat trying to process the number he had just heard. I'm sorry, did you say? $900 million. Immediate wire transfer. No financing, no contingencies, a clean sale. Mr. Jordan, that's $150 million above what anyone else has offered. Sir Richard, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How much did your company lose during the pandemic? There was another silence. Michael knew he had hit a nerve. Approximately $300 million, Sir Richard admitted. And how much do you need to save your other properties? I do my homework, Sir Richard. You need $200 million to keep the Pemberton Empire afloat for the next 5 years. Sir Richard was visibly shaken. How did Michael know all this? $900 million would give you $700 million in net profit, Michael continued. Enough to not only save your other properties, but to expand them. A single sale that would save your entire family legacy. Mr. Jordan, even if I were interested, this type of transaction takes months. 2 days. Impossible. Sir Richard, have you ever known impossible to apply to me? The aristocrat chuckled nervously. Of course, he knew the legend of Michael Jordan, the man who turned impossible into inevitable. I need to consult my board. You have 1 hour to decide. After that, the offer expires. 1 hour? That's absurd. Sir Richard, I'm offering you the chance to save everything your family has built. The question is, do you want to be remembered as the man who saved the Pemberton Empire, or the one who lost it due to pride? Michael hung up without waiting for a reply. He knew men like Sir Richard. When confronted with the choice between pride and survival, they always chose survival. 53 minutes later, the phone rang. Mr. Jordan? This is Sir Richard Pemberton. We have a deal. Michael smiled. Phase 1 complete. London, the Ritz-Carlton. Madison Clark was having the best day of her career. The story of the housekeeping staffer who attempted to pose as a guest had made its rounds throughout the hotel, and she was being lauded for her vigilance and upholding hotel standards. Madison, you were brilliant yesterday, Robert Davis said, entering her office bearing 2 coffees. The way you handled that situation was masterful. Madison accepted the coffee with a self-satisfied smile. She had spent the morning recounting the story to any staff member willing to listen, each iteration embellished with more dramatic details. Honestly, Robert, the sheer audacity of some people astounds me, she said, gesticulating dramatically. She actually thought she could pull off that charade on us. And the way you unmasked her in front of everyone? Robert shook his head in admiration. It was like watching a master at work. The two laughed, clearly pleased with their performance from the previous day. Little did they know that, at that very moment, attorneys were reviewing acquisition contracts a mere few miles away. Do you think she'll try to come back? Robert inquired. Heaven forbid, Madison rolled her eyes. I hope she's learned her lesson. People like her need to know their place. And what exactly is her place? A male voice inquired from the doorway. The young concierge rarely interacted with management, preferring to remain focused on his duties. James, Madison forced a smile. We weren't expecting you. Pardon the interruption, James said, but his expression betrayed not a hint of remorse. I couldn't help but overhear you discussing yesterday's lady. Oh, yes, Robert waved a dismissive hand. Situation resolved. Madison proved quite efficient. James nodded slowly. But there was something in his eyes Madison couldn't quite decipher. "May I ask a question?" James said. "Did you verify her identity?" Madison and Robert exchanged glances. The question caught them off guard. "It wasn't necessary," Madison said defensively. "It was patently obvious she didn't belong here." "Obvious how?" James pressed. "James, you wouldn't understand," Robert interjected. "You lack sufficient experience to recognize when someone is attempting to impersonate another." James nodded again, but his expression remained neutral. "Of course. Well, I must return to my duties. There are some strange goings-on today." "Unusual activity," Madison furrowed her brow. "Lawyers, many lawyers, and some individuals who appear to be from real estate appraisal firms." Madison and Robert exchanged glances. This was out of the ordinary. "Likely some sort of insurance renewal," Robert offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Most likely," James concurred. "Right then, back to my duties." After James departed, an uncomfortable silence hung over the office. "How peculiar," Madison murmured. "What, James?" "No, this business with the lawyers. Why weren't we informed?" Robert shrugged, but internally he too was concerned. In his 2 decades in hospitality, he had learned that when lawyers appeared unannounced, changes were imminent. In the lobby, James Wilson discreetly observed the unusual activity. He had counted at least 6 individuals in expensive attire who were clearly not regular guests. All carried leather briefcases and exuded the characteristic bearing of corporate professionals. A blonde woman, particularly elegant, caught his attention. She spoke on the phone in hushed tones, but James managed to catch a few words. Acquisition, transfer, and immediate implementation. Emma Rodriguez at the reception desk had also noticed the strange activity. During her morning shift, she had been questioned 3 times about the hotel's organizational structure by individuals who identified themselves as external consultants. "James," she called out discreetly as he passed the reception desk, "do you know what's going on?" "I'm not certain," James replied, though his expression suggested he harbored some theories. "But something significant is afoot." "Do you think it has to do with that lady from yesterday?" James paused and looked at Emma with renewed interest. "Why do you ask that?" "I checked her in." Emma lowered her voice. "There was nothing suspicious about her. Valid credit card, U.S. passport, confirmed reservation for the presidential suite." "Presidential suite?" "Precisely, and she was exceedingly polite." None of Madison and Robert's assertions seemed to add up. James assimilated this information. A presidential suite implied considerable wealth. Considerable wealth translated to influence. And influential individuals publicly humiliated tended to seek repercussions. "Emma, do you recall her name?" "Yvette Prieto." James mentally repeated the name. There was something familiar about it, but he couldn't quite place where he had heard it. "Do you think we should warn Madison and Robert about this?" Emma asked. James pondered for a moment. 2 employees had publicly humiliated a guest who was paying for the hotel's most expensive suite. Now there were lawyers and consultants everywhere. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. "No," he finally said. "I think they'll figure it out on their own very soon." On the 10th floor, Yvette had spent the morning exploring London exactly as Michael had suggested. She visited the British Museum, walked through Hyde Park, and had tea at Fortnum and Mason. But the entire time she sensed a strange energy in the air. When she returned to the hotel around 4 p.m., she immediately noticed the unusual commotion in the lobby. People in expensive attire conversed in small groups, and there was a palpable tension in the air. She walked to the elevators without incident. Madison Clark was somewhere in the hotel, but fortunately, their paths did not cross. Back in her room, Yvette called Michael. "How was your day, love?" he asked. "Wonderful. London is amazing." "But Michael..." "Yes?" "There's something going on at the hotel. Lots of lawyers, consultants. It's as if something big is about to happen." Michael smiled on the other end of the line. "It's interesting you mention that. Michael, what have you done?" "Let's just say Madison Clark and Robert Davis are in for a very special surprise tomorrow night." "What kind of surprise?" "The kind they'll never forget. Yvette, trust me, tomorrow night is going to be illuminating." The following morning, Yvette was awakened by a gentle tap on her suite door. She opened it to find James Wilson holding a golden envelope on a silver tray. "Good morning, Madame Prieto. I have a special delivery for you." Yvette accepted the envelope with curiosity. Her name was written in elegant calligraphy on artisanal paper. "Do you know who sent this?" "No, madam. It was left at the reception with specific instructions to be delivered to you this morning." After James left, Yvette carefully opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on high-quality paper. "The management of the Ritz-Carlton is pleased to invite you to a special charity gala in honor of the International Education Foundation. The event will take place this evening at 8 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom. Attire, formal, RSP not required. Your esteemed presence would be an honor." Yvette perused the invitation thrice. It struck her as peculiar. She had not been apprised of any such event during her stay, and the formal tone of the invitation struck her as almost urgent. She picked up her phone and dialed reception. "Good morning. This is Yvette Prieto from the Presidential Suite. I've received an invitation for a gala this evening. Could you provide further details?" "One moment, please," replied Emma Rodriguez. Yvette waited, discerning the faint sounds of typing and hushed conversations in the background. "Miss Prieto, yes, I can confirm there is indeed a special event this evening. It is an exclusive affair for selected guests and local dignitaries." "Selected guests, you say?" "Indeed, madame. A highly exclusive roster." Yvette disconnected the call, still perplexed. She resolved to contact Michael. "Michael, something rather peculiar has transpired." "You've received the invitation, then?" Yvette paused mid-sentence. "How did you—" "Michael, was this your doing?" "Let's just say I greased a few wheels. Will you be attending the event?" "I'm not sure. It's quite peculiar, Michael. Why orchestrate such an elaborate affair?" "Because some lessons demand to be imparted with flair." "Yvette, do you happen to have a particular gown with you?" "Yes, I brought that navy blue Valentino you're so fond of." "Splendid. Wear it. And Yvette." "Yes? Tonight you will grasp the depth of my affection for you. You will witness your own strength mirrored back to you." Michael disconnected the call, leaving Yvette with an abundance of questions and precious few answers. Yet there was an underlying cadence in his voice that assuaged her concerns. Whatever elaborate scheme he had devised, she placed her complete trust in him. Yvette dedicated the day to mentally steeling herself for the evening ahead. She availed herself of the hotel's spa facilities for a rejuvenating massage and a restorative facial. The irony was not lost on her. She was primping in the very establishment where she had been subjected to such humiliation merely 2 days prior. In the afternoon, she commenced her toilette. The navy blue Valentino gown embraced her form flawlessly, accentuating her graceful figure. She selected understated yet sophisticated adornments, diamond stud earrings and a delicate necklace Michael had bestowed upon her for her birthday. Her hair was coiffed into a low, elegant chignon, and her makeup was subtle yet impeccable. As she gazed into the mirror, she beheld a woman radiating confidence and power. At precisely 7:45 p.m., Yvette emerged from her suite and proceeded towards the elevators. The corridor was hushed, yet she could discern classical music reverberating from the floor below. The lobby had undergone a complete transformation. Intricate floral arrangements adorned every surface, and staff in immaculate uniforms directed guests. The Grand Ballroom was clearly the venue for the event. Yvette approached the ballroom, observing the other attendees. There were men in tuxedos and women in ball gowns. Evidently, this was no small gathering. At the ballroom's entrance, she was greeted by an attendant consulting a list. "Name, please." "Yvette Prieto." The attendant located her name and made a notation. "Welcome, Mrs. Prieto. You're at the head table." The head table? Yvette grew even more perplexed. How could an ordinary guest be seated at the head table of a charity event? She stepped into the ballroom, utterly awestruck. The Grand Ballroom was resplendent. Golden lights cast a magical ambiance, and the space was teeming with London's social elite. Conversations in multiple languages filled the air. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. Yvette accepted a flute and began to circulate, discreetly observing the other guests. It was then that she saw her. Madison Clark was across the room, donning a stunning black gown and clearly in her element. She was gesticulating animatedly while conversing with a group of well-dressed individuals. Robert Davis was also present, immaculate in a tuxedo, circulating the room as if he were the event's host. Yvette's stomach churned. Their presence transformed the evening from mysterious to potentially humiliating. What would transpire when they spotted her? But before she could decide whether to make an exit, Madison saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. Madison paused mid-conversation, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion, and then to something resembling vexation. Yvette took a deep breath. There was no retreating now. Madison began to advance towards her, purposefully navigating through the throng. Robert, observing the movement, followed suit. "Well, well, well," Madison drawled as she came close enough to be heard. "Look who managed to secure an invitation." Several nearby guests turned to observe the interaction. Yvette maintained her composure, recalling Michael's words about her inner strength. "Good evening, Madison," Yvette replied calmly. "How did you get in here?" Robert interjected, joining the confrontation. "This is a private event." A circle of onlookers began to coalesce around the trio. Among them, Lady Pemberton observed with mounting interest, discerning the nascent stirrings of a social drama. "I received an invitation," Yvette responded simply, her voice retaining its composure amidst the escalating tension. Madison guffawed, the sound reverberating through the hall and attracting even more attention. "An invitation? For you?" She cast a dramatic glance around, ensuring her audience's rapt attention. "Someone has unequivocally committed an administrative blunder." "What kind of error?" inquired Sir Charles, one of the guests who had paused to observe. Madison turned to him with a supercilious smirk. "This individual," she gestured dismissively toward Yvette, "is employed as a cleaner at this hotel. Just 2 days prior, I apprehended her attempting to pass herself off as a guest." Murmurs of surprise and disquiet rippled through the assembled spectators. Yvette maintained her dignified demeanor, yet each gaze felt like a piercing jab. "A cleaning staff member?" Lady Pemberton arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "What a truly anomalous situation." "Precisely," Robert chimed in, unequivocally siding with Madison. "This is precisely why the Ritz-Carlton upholds such stringent standards. We simply cannot condone individuals permeating venues where they have no rightful place." Further guests converged, drawn by the escalating commotion. The cordon around them expanded, morphing what ought to have been a private discourse into an overt public spectacle. "Imagine," Madison continued, her voice emboldened by the burgeoning attention, "the sheer temerity of someone presuming they can simply attire themselves elegantly and feign membership among our exclusive clientele." "In point of fact," a deep, resonant, and authoritative voice interjected, "there has been no error whatsoever." All heads swiveled to ascertain the speaker. The din of conversations within the ballroom abruptly subsided as all attention gravitated toward the voice's origin. A tall black man, clad in an immaculate tuxedo, strode toward the group. His presence was magnetic. Each step exuded confidence and power. The guests unconsciously parted, forming a path for him. Yvette felt her heart seize in her chest. It was Michael Jordan. Madison and Robert, however, did not recognize him immediately. To them, he was merely another guest questioning their authority. "Pardon me, sir," Madison stated in her most commanding tone, "but this is a matter we are addressing internally." Michael halted directly before the group, his gaze unwavering upon Madison. When he smiled, there was no warmth in his expression. "Internal situation?" he repeated, his voice charged with an authority that made several people in the circle unconsciously recoil. "Interesting. Can you explain exactly what this situation is?" Robert interjected, clearly annoyed by the interference. "Sir, with all due respect, this woman should not be here. She is a hotel employee attempting to pass herself off as a guest." Michael nodded slowly, as if processing the information. "I see. And did you verify her identity?" "It wasn't necessary," Madison swiftly replied. "It was obvious from her appearance that she doesn't belong at an event like this." "Obvious from her appearance?" Michael repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerously low tone. "How interesting. Could you elaborate on what exactly about her appearance led you to that conclusion?" Uncomfortable murmurs spread through the observing group. Several guests began to recognize Michael, and expressions of shock appeared on some faces. Madison, however, was too focused on defending her position to notice the shifts around her. "Well, it's obvious," she gestured vaguely. "Her demeanor, her attire. People like her don't frequent establishments like this." "People like her," Michael reiterated, each word imbued with significance. Lady Pemberton then whispered something to Sir Charles, who in turn whispered to another guest. A ripple of recognition began to spread through the group. "My God," someone murmured, "it's Michael Jordan." Madison and Robert finally grasped the name and turned for a closer look at the man they had been confronting. The realization struck them like a bolt of lightning. "Mr. Jordan?" Madison stammered. "Are you—" "Michael Jordan," he confirmed, extending a hand to Yvette. "And this is my wife, Yvette Prieto Jordan." The ensuing silence was deafening. Madison and Robert stood frozen, their faces gradually draining of all color. "Your wife?" Robert managed to articulate. "My wife," Michael confirmed, his voice now imbued with an authority that made the entire hall seem to shrink. "The woman you publicly humiliated 2 days ago. The woman you called a cleaning lady. The woman you said didn't belong here." Lady Pemberton covered her mouth with her hand. Sir Charles shook his head in disbelief. Other guests exchanged shocked glances. Madison tried to speak, but no sound escaped her lips. Robert seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. "Is there something you'd like to say to my wife?" Michael asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The grand hall had transformed into a theater, with all 150 guests now forming a wide circle around the unfolding drama. Cell phone cameras discreetly began to emerge, capturing what was clearly set to be a historic moment. Madison Clark remained in shock, her mouth agape like a fish out of water. Robert Davis appeared to have physically shrunk, his authoritative demeanor completely crumbling. "Mr. Jordan," Madison finally managed to stammer, we didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Michael interrupted, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "Didn't know she's my wife? Or didn't know you treated a paying guest like refuse based purely on the color of her skin?" The words struck Madison like physical blows. Several people in the observing circle murmured expressions of shock and disapproval. It wasn't about race," Robert attempted to defend, but his trembling voice betrayed that he knew exactly what had transpired. Michael laughed, but the sound was cold and devoid of humor. "It wasn't about race?" he repeated. "Then explain yourselves. An elegant, educated woman, paying for the hotel's presidential suite, and you automatically assumed she was a housekeeper. Why?" Utter silence. Madison and Robert knew that any response would only incriminate them further. "Allow me to elucidate a few points," Michael continued, now clearly addressing the entire assembled audience. "My wife is an international model. She speaks 4 languages. She holds an MBA from a prestigious university. And you looked at her and saw only a Latina woman who, in your estimation, did not belong here." A ripple of indignant murmurs began to spread throughout the room. Lady Pemberton shook her head in manifest disapproval, while Sir Charles murmured exclamations of shock to his wife. "But here's the crux of the matter," Michael continued, his voice acquiring an intensity that brought the entire room to a hushed standstill. "You not only perpetrated a contemptible act of discrimination, you did so publicly, deliberately, and callously." Madison finally found her voice, though it emerged as a desperate, reedy whisper. "Mr. Jordan, please, it was merely a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Michael pivoted towards her with an intensity that caused her to visibly recoil. "You made it a point to humiliate her before dozens of witnesses. You laughed. You made sport of her. You even suggested summoning the press to further ridicule her." Every word Michael uttered was a precise accusation, striking its intended mark. Madison was visibly trembling at this point. "And you," Michael turned to Robert, "endorsed every second of it. You laughed along. You actively participated in the debasement of an innocent guest." Robert attempted to speak, but only incoherent sounds escaped him. "Therefore," Michael paused dramatically, I have decided that you both need to learn some crucial lessons regarding consequences. He gestured towards Sarah Williams, who had materialized silently beside the group. She carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of one poised to deliver devastating tidings. Sarah, Michael instructed, kindly apprise Madison and Robert of the recent changes within the hotel. Sarah unzipped her portfolio and extracted several documents. Her voice was clear and professional as she proceeded to speak. Effective 2 p.m. today, the Ritz-Carlton London has been officially acquired by the Jordan Hospitality Group. Audible murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Numerous guests turned to one another in utter disbelief. This signifies, Sarah interjected, that Michael Jordan is now the proprietor of this hotel. Madison and Robert seemed to have ceased breathing entirely. The full weight of the revelation engulfed them like an avalanche. As the new owner, Michael reclaimed the floor. One of my initial executive directives pertains to employees who exhibit discrimination, malevolence, and a complete dearth of professionalism. He paused, allowing the tension to mount. The entire ballroom was enveloped in an absolute hush. Madison Clark, Robert Davis, his voice sliced through the air like a judicial pronouncement. You are terminated. Forthwith. The visceral impact of the words was palpable. Madison recoiled as if struck. Robert turned ashen. But before you depart, Michael continued unflinchingly, there is one final matter that must be addressed. He turned to Yvette, who had remained composed throughout the entire ordeal, and gently clasped her hand. Madison and Robert, Michael stated, you will issue an apology to my wife, publicly, in the presence of everyone assembled, and you will address her with the deference she has always merited. Madison was weeping now, tears streaming freely down her face. The stark realization that she had forfeited not only her position, but her entire career was irrevocably coalescing. Mrs. Jordan, she whispered, her voice tremulous and choked, I beg your forgiveness. More audibly, Michael stated icily, so that everyone may bear witness. Madison took a deep breath and projected her voice. Mrs. Yvette Jordan, I offer my most profound apologies for my utterly unacceptable conduct. I was grievously mistaken. Utterly so. And you, Robert? Michael turned to the man who appeared to have aged a decade in the preceding 5 minutes. Mrs. Jordan, Robert said, his voice quivering, I implore your forgiveness for my reprehensible conduct. There is no conceivable excuse for our actions. Yvette, who had remained largely silent throughout the bulk of the confrontation, finally spoke. Her voice was resolute, yet devoid of malice. I accept your apologies, she said. I hope you derive a crucial lesson from this, and never again treat another individual with such contempt. Michael nodded approvingly at his wife, then turned back to Madison and Robert. Now depart, he said simply, and you will never again work within the hospitality industry. I will personally ensure that your actions today are disseminated among all the foremost hotel groups globally. The final verdict was delivered with a composure more devastating than any scream. Madison and Robert understood. Their careers were over. As the two former employees walked toward the exit, discreetly escorted by security personnel who had materialized silently, the hall erupted in whispered conversations. Unbelievable, murmured Lady Pemberton. Absolute justice, Sir Charles concurred. Michael turned to the assembly of impressed guests. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice now reverting to a warmer tone, I apologize for this interruption, but sometimes important lessons need to be taught publicly. Spontaneous applause began, hesitant at first, then growing in intensity. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet, applauding. Now, Michael continued, let us proceed with our gala. After all, it is a night of celebration. But everyone in the hall knew they had witnessed something far more significant than a mere charity gala. They had seen justice served in real time. As Madison and Robert were escorted out of the grand hall, a remarkable transformation swept through the room. The tension that had pervaded the last few minutes dissipated, replaced by a different energy. A blend of relief, admiration, and anticipation. Michael took the microphone on stage, his presence commanding absolute attention. Ladies and gentlemen, His voice echoed clearly through the sound system. Thank you for your patience during this necessary clarification. Respectful laughter rippled through the hall. Michael's humor helped to break the remaining tension. As you have just discovered, I am now the proud owner of the Ritz-Carlton London, and I can assure you that significant changes are already underway. He gestured toward a man approaching the stage, James Wilson, who had been discreetly promoted amidst the chaos of the past few days. I would like to introduce James Wilson, our new general manager. James exemplifies the values we wish to foster in this hotel: respect, dignity, and equitable treatment for all guests and staff. Warm applause greeted James, who ascended the stage, visibly moved yet resolute. Thank you, Mr. Jordan, James said into the microphone. As a first order of business, we will immediately implement new staff training protocols focused on diversity, inclusion, and universal respect. More applause. In the audience, Emma Rodriguez smiled proudly at her promoted colleague. Furthermore, James continued, we will establish a mentorship program for employees from all backgrounds, ensuring that talent is recognized and nurtured regardless of race, gender, or social origin. Perfect, Michael said, reclaiming the microphone. Now, before we proceed with our celebration, I would like to say a few words about what we have just witnessed. The hall fell silent once more, everyone hanging on his every word. What Madison Clark and Robert Davis did to my wife was not merely an error in judgment. It was a manifestation of deeply ingrained prejudices that have no place in our society. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Yvette was judged not by her character, her accomplishments, or even her conduct, but by her physical appearance and ethnic background. This is unacceptable in any context, but it is especially abhorrent in an establishment that prides itself on serving people from across the globe. Lady Pemberton nodded vigorously, as did many other guests. But here is the most crucial lesson. Michael paused for effect. Actions have consequences. When you choose to treat other human beings with cruelty and discrimination, there is a price to pay. He looked directly to where Madison and Robert had been moments earlier. Madison and Robert discovered today that their actions bore consequences they never anticipated. But this is not merely a story about retribution. It is about accountability. Michael gestured towards Yvette, who joined him on stage. She exuded dignity and grace, a striking contrast to the humiliation she had endured 2 days prior. My wife could have reacted with anger. She could have responded with cruelty. Instead, she maintained her dignity, accepted the apologies when tendered, and evinced the kind of class that Madison and Robert never grasped. Spontaneous applause erupted throughout the hall, this time specifically for Yvette. Michael continued, "This is how truly sophisticated individuals comport themselves. Not through arrogance or cruelty, but through grace under pressure." Yvette took the microphone, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you," she said. "Over the past 2 days, I have learned that the true measure of a person is not how they treat those they perceive as superiors, but how they treat those they perceive as inferiors." A respectful silence permeated the hall. Madison and Robert viewed me as inferior based on assumptions about my race and background. Yet the irony is that they exposed their own character flaws in the process. Murmurs of assent rippled through the audience. I hope this experience teaches them to treat all human beings with the fundamental dignity everyone deserves. She paused. For in the end, it doesn't matter how many accolades you possess or how much authority you wield. What matters is how you treat your fellow human beings when you believe no one of consequence is watching. The ensuing applause was prolonged and heartfelt. Several guests discreetly dabbed away tears. Michael reclaimed the microphone. "And now," he said with a genuine smile, "let us celebrate not only this gala, but the dawn of a new era for the Ritz-Carlton London. An era founded on respect, inclusivity, and genuine excellence in service." The music began to play once more, and gradually the usual gala conversations began to resume. But everyone in the hall knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. In the hotel's corridors, Madison and Robert collected their personal belongings under security supervision. Their faces were flushed with humiliation and shock. "How did this happen?" Madison whispered to Robert as they cleared out their offices. "We humiliated a billionaire's wife," Robert responded grimly. and he showed us precisely what that costs. Our careers are over. Madison began to weep anew. He said he'd spread the word throughout the industry. Then we'll have to find a new industry, Robert said, because he wasn't bluffing. Meanwhile, back in the hall, the gala continued with renewed vigor. Guests continuously approached Michael and Yvette, not merely to greet them, but to express admiration for how they had handled the situation. "Mr. Jordan," said Sir Charles, "you delivered a master class in dignified justice." "Mrs. Jordan," Lady Pemberton took Yvette's hands. "Your grace under pressure was inspiring." As the evening progressed, it became clear that the story would spread far beyond the walls of the Ritz-Carlton. Numerous attendees were already disseminating details across social media platforms, while journalists present at the event were mentally composing their articles. Madison and Robert's public humiliation would be remembered not merely as a moment of vindication, but as a potent illustration that discriminatory actions carry tangible repercussions. The following morning, the Ritz-Carlton London awoke to a profoundly altered landscape. The narrative of the gala had already permeated London, subsequently spreading across the rest of Europe, and was rapidly attaining international prominence. Yvette awoke nestled in Michael's embrace within their presidential suite, the very suite where she had wept 2 days prior, following her public humiliation. The irony was not lost on either of them. "Good morning, Mrs. Hotel Proprietor," Michael quipped with a mischievous grin. "Good morning, Mr. Impulsive Acquirer," she countered, snuggling closer to him. "Impulsive?" He feigned indignation. "I prefer strategic and protective." Yvette chuckled, her melodic laughter filling the room, which was bathed in the soft London sunlight. "Michael, did you truly acquire an entire hotel simply because 2 individuals were rude to me?" "Technically," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "I acquired an entire hotel to impress upon 2 individuals the concept of repercussions. The fact that they were uncivil to the woman I cherish more than life itself merely dictated the intensity of the lesson." The room's telephone rang, puncturing their intimate moment. Michael answered. "Mr. Jordan?" It was James Wilson. "I apologize for disturbing you at such an early hour, but there's something you need to be apprised of." "What is it, James?" "The media, sir. There are over 20 news crews congregated outside the hotel, and the phone has been incessantly ringing with interview requests." Michael sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair. "That was to be anticipated. How are the staff coping?" "Remarkably well, actually. Morale has never been higher. Everyone is immensely proud to be employed by someone who champions what is right." "And reservations?" "Remarkably, sir. We've received more booking inquiries in the past 12 hours than we typically accrue in an entire week. It seems people are keen to patronize a hotel that espouses principles." Michael permitted himself a smile. At times, upholding what was right also proved commercially advantageous. "Excellent. James, organize a press conference for this afternoon at 3 o'clock and ensure that all personnel are aware they have my unequivocal backing." "Yes, sir. And Mr. Jordan?" "Yes? Thank you for everything. Working here holds a different meaning now." After Michael concluded his call, Yvette sat beside him. "A press conference? People want to hear our side of the story, and I want to ensure the right message is conveyed." "What message?" "That discrimination carries consequences, that human dignity is non-negotiable, and that sometimes those in positions of power need to wield that power to protect the disempowered." 2 hours later, they descended to the lobby. Television cameras, reporters with microphones, photographers, all eager to capture the couple who had become an overnight sensation. "Mr. Jordan! Mr. Jordan!" Voices clamored from every direction. "How do you feel about becoming a symbol of social justice?" "Ms. Jordan, what was it like to be so publicly discriminated against? Did you orchestrate this retribution from the outset?" Michael raised a hand, and gradually the cacophony subsided. "We will hold a formal press briefing at 3 o'clock, he announced. "Until then, I would simply like to state that what transpired here was not about vengeance. It was about accountability." They navigated through the media throng, escorted by security personnel, and exited the hotel for a morning stroll through London. For the first time since their arrival, Yvette could walk the streets unburdened by the weight of humiliation. Michael, she said as they walked through Hyde Park, do you realize our lives will never be the same? In what sense? We're now the couple who bought a hotel to teach racists a lesson. That will follow us indefinitely. Michael stopped walking and turned to her. Yvette, if it means that others will think twice before treating someone the way Madison and Robert treated you, then so be it. Some legacies are worth bearing. In the afternoon, the grand ballroom, the same hall where justice had been dispensed the previous night, was transformed into a press conference venue. Over 50 journalists from across the globe were in attendance. Michael and Yvette entered together, their hands intertwined, presenting a united front to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael began, thank you for being here. I know there are many questions, so I will endeavor to address the most pertinent ones. A BBC journalist was the first to raise her hand. Mr. Jordan, critics are deeming your response disproportionate. Acquiring an entire hotel due to a misunderstanding seems extreme. Michael leaned into the microphone. With all due respect, there was no misunderstanding. There was deliberate and cruel discrimination against my wife based on her race and appearance. If you consider it extreme to employ legal recourse to combat racism, then yes, I am extreme. Applause rippled through the room. An American reporter was next. Ms. Jordan, how did you feel during the initial humiliation? Yvette took a deep breath before responding. I felt invisible, as if my humanity didn't matter. Madison and Robert looked at me and saw only stereotypes, not a real person with feelings, dignity, and worth. But now I feel hopeful. Hopeful that our story will encourage others to stand up against discrimination, and hopeful that those in positions of power will wield that power responsibly. Questions continued for over an hour, covering all facets of the story. When it concluded, it was clear that Michael and Yvette had successfully commanded the narrative. It was not a tale of wealthy retribution. It was a narrative of justice, dignity, and the repercussions of discriminatory actions. That evening, as they dined in the hotel restaurant, now their hotel, they reflected on the extraordinary events of the preceding days. Do you harbor any regrets? Yvette inquired. Only one thing, Michael replied. And what might that be? Not having encountered Madison and Robert sooner, so I could have dismissed them earlier. Yvette chuckled, shaking her head. You are impossible. Impossible, yet effective. Across the restaurant, James Wilson observed his new principals with admiration. In 48 hours, they had not only transformed the hotel, but had also dispatched a message that would reverberate far beyond London's confines. Sometimes, he mused, justice truly is served. 6 months hence, the narrative of Yvette and Michael Jordan had transcended a mere viral news story. It had evolved into a full-fledged movement. The Jordan Protocol, the training program instituted at the Ritz-Carlton, London, was being adopted by hotel chains globally. Universities were employing the case as a study in hospitality management and social justice curricula. Madison Clark and Robert Davis never again secured employment within the hospitality industry. Madison was peddling insurance in a small town outside London, while Robert had relocated to the continent in an attempt to rebuild his life. Both bore the considerable weight of their actions on that fateful day. Yet the story did not conclude with their ignominious downfall. At the Ritz-Carlton, London, now rechristened the Jordan London, a bronze plaque was installed in the lobby. It simply read, "Every individual who enters here merits dignity, respect, and equitable treatment, irrespective of their appearance, origin, or circumstances. This is our unwavering commitment to you." James Wilson, now the regional managing director of Jordan Hospitality Group, oversaw the implementation of the new standards across additional properties Michael had acquired in Paris, Rome, and New York. Emma Rodriguez had been elevated to Director of Guest Experience, a newly created position specifically designed to ensure that incidents akin to Yvette's experience would never again transpire. Mrs. Jordan, Emma stated during one of her inspection visits, I wanted to extend my gratitude once more. What transpired here has irrevocably transformed not only this hotel, but the entire industry. Yvette smiled, walking through the lobby that had been the backdrop to her humiliation, and subsequently her vindication. Emma, you all undertook the arduous work. We merely facilitated the opportunity for change. But it was more than that, Emma insisted. You demonstrated that there are tangible repercussions for discriminatory conduct. It transformed our collective perspective on our work. Indeed, the impact had been profound. The Jordan London had become one of the most esteemed hotels globally, not solely for its opulence, but for its core values. Waiting lists to work there extended for months. Michael had founded the Dignity Foundation, an organization that educated hospitality professionals globally on diversity and inclusion. The foundation had already provided training to over 50,000 employees across 30 countries. Mr. Jordan, James Wilson approached during a director's meeting, we have the quarterly figures. And 98% occupancy, customer satisfaction at 99.2%, and franchise inquiries from 47 different countries. Michael nodded, content but not taken aback. People want to patronize establishments that uphold values, James, and they want to be employed by companies that champion what is right. There's one more matter, James said with a slight hesitation. We received a letter. So was it from whom? Madison Clark. Michael furrowed his brow. In the 6 months since her dismissal, neither Madison nor Robert had attempted contact. What does she want? She wants nothing. She offered her apologies, again, and said that our narrative compelled her to scrutinize her own biases. She began volunteering with civil rights organizations. Michael processed this information in silence. And Robert? He also wrote, he's delivering lectures on the perils of unconscious bias at European universities. Interesting, Michael murmured. At times, consequences impart the most valuable lessons. That night, Michael and Yvette dined at the very restaurant where it all had begun, the hotel restaurant where she had been humiliated. But now it was their restaurant, within their hotel, where scores of employees from all ethnicities worked with pride and dignity. Did you ever conceive that acquiring a hotel would transform so many lives? Yvette inquired. Honestly, I merely intended to safeguard you and impart a lesson in respect to 2 individuals. The rest unfolded organically. Michael, do you realize we've become emblematic figures? People stop us on the street to tell us their own stories of discrimination. Does that bother you? Yvette paused for a moment. In fact, it makes me proud. If our experience gave a voice to those who were powerless to defend themselves, then it was worth every difficult moment. Every penny spent, Michael concurred. Do you still have the receipt? She quipped. $900 million to buy a hotel. A few more million for renovations and expansions. But seeing the smiles on the faces of employees who know they are valued? That's priceless. As they finished dinner, James approached the table. Pardon the interruption, but there's something you need to see. He switched on the television in the private dining room. A news program was airing a special report. 6 months after the incident that rocked the hospitality world, the Jordan effect continues to ripple out. International hotel chains report significant decreases in discrimination-related complaints, and training programs based on the Jordan model are being implemented globally. The report featured interviews with hotel employees worldwide, all discussing how Yvette's story had altered their approach to customer service. Now I pause and reflect, a receptionist in Tokyo stated, before making any judgment about a guest. Ms. Jordan's story taught me that we never truly know who stands before us. A hotel manager in São Paulo was equally forthright. What transpired in London showed us that discrimination is not merely morally wrong. It is economically destructive. No business can afford the luxury of treating customers poorly. See, Michael said, switching off the television. Sometimes a small action creates ripples that spread far beyond what we ever imagined. Small action? Yvette raised an eyebrow. You bought a hotel. Small compared to the impact it had. As they walked back to their suite, now permanently reserved for them, Yvette reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. She had come to London seeking anonymity and peace. Instead, she encountered humiliation, but also unearthed a strength she didn't know she possessed. And alongside Michael, she had instigated changes that would continue to impact lives long after they were gone. Michael, she said as they prepared for bed, there's one thing I never asked you. What? Did you truly orchestrate all of this? The gala, the dramatic unveiling, everything? Michael offered an enigmatic smile. My intention was to acquire the hotel and dismiss Madison and Robert. The remainder was sheer instinct. One must sometimes trust that upholding what is right will yield the appropriate outcomes. And what if it had faltered? Then at least I would have rested soundly, secure in the knowledge that I had championed my wife and secured the justice she was due. Yvette nestled into his embrace, experiencing a profound sense of security and validation that transcended the confines of wealth or influence. This was the unyielding affection of an individual who would deem her worthy irrespective of how others might perceive or treat her. "I love you," she murmured, "and I you. Tomorrow we shall persist in reshaping the world, one establishment at a time." Beyond their window, London slumbered, blissfully unaware that within a chamber of what had become the Jordan London, two individuals, having transmuted humiliation into systemic reform, were quietly strategizing their subsequent endeavor. For the narrative of Yvette and Michael Jordan transcended mere vengeance or retribution. It underscored the potency of confronting injustice, not solely for personal vindication, but for the benefit of all who would follow. And this saga, which commenced with tears in a hotel lobby, had transmuted into a beacon of hope in hearts across the globe. The following morning, Yvette awoke to discover Michael already attired and engaged in a Mandarin conversation on the phone. She immediately recognized the tenor of his voice. He was clearly brokering yet another acquisition. "Beijing?" she inquired as he concluded the call. "Shanghai, actually. It appears there's an establishment there whose personnel are in dire need of instruction regarding the respectful treatment of international clientele." Yvette shook her head, an amused chuckle escaping her lips. "You can't possibly acquire hotels in every locale where discrimination is rampant." "Why not?" he queried, a smile playing on his lips. "I possess the financial wherewithal, you possess the invaluable lived experience, and the world is in dire need of internalizing these crucial lessons." "Michael Jordan," she declared, rising to kiss him, "you are, without question, the most unyieldingly principled individual I have ever encountered. I shall indeed interpret that as a commendation." It was entirely deliberate. As they braced themselves for yet another day, overseeing their burgeoning hospitality empire and social justice foundation, Yvette gazed through the window at the thoroughfares of London unfolding beneath them. Somewhere within that sprawling metropolis, Madison Clark was undoubtedly stirring to another day in her newly diminished existence, irrevocably bearing the repercussions of her past transgressions. Robert Davis was gearing up for another lecture on unconscious bias for college students. Meanwhile, in hotels globally, staff were treating every guest with the dignity all deserve, mindful of the narrative that had unfolded in this very room. Sometimes, Yvette mused, the greatest victories are those that not only rectify an injustice, but preempt thousands more. And this narrative, which had commenced with a simple query, "You don't know who I am, do you?" had become the answer to a far more profound question. How do we wield our power to safeguard the dignity of all? The answer, as Michael had demonstrated, was straightforward. With absolute resolve, boundless resources, and unconditional love for those who may lack the power to defend themselves. Such was the profound lesson of the Jordan London, and it was a lesson that would continue to resonate long after the last headline concerning its story had faded from memory. If you appreciated this extraordinary tale of justice and transformation, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We feature stories that illustrate how ordinary individuals confront extraordinary circumstances and how the power of resolve can transform the world. Be sure to hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss out on any inspiring narratives. We'll see you in the next video.